Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, July 7th, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about the state of New Jersey and the governor's race that is set to take place this upcoming November election. We are months away from a very, very important race as New Jersey has come back into the national spotlight after a very contentious 2024 presidential election. A lot of focus on a lot of states, but none being New Jersey. Yet despite the lack of interest and the lack of focus on the state, the presidential election in New Jersey was narrower than a number of other states that both political parties heavily invested in. States like Iowa and Ohio and Texas and Florida all had significantly larger margins than the state of New Jersey, and it all came down to voter persuasion, ultimately in favor of Donald Trump. Now, New Jersey's presidential election being decided by one of the narrowest margins we have seen between a Democrat and a Republican since 1992 marks a very difficult time for Democrats as they try to navigate this upcoming election cycle. Now, the primary has come and went in New Jersey, and Jack Ciattarelli and Mikey Sherrill will face off in the November general election. But as the focus comes down to New Jersey, as a state we arguably have not covered to the extent that it is worth, New Jersey's governor's race has become one that many Republicans believe could be a sleeper race in the upcoming election. Now, looking at New Jersey and Virginia and New York City, all of which are going to be some of the most hotly contested states and cities that will hold elections this November, New Jersey, again, like I just mentioned, Republicans are hoping for something shocking here. And a big reason for that is because coming off of the 2024 presidential election, New Jersey and Virginia voted by roughly the same amount in this state. You can see that Virginia went to Kamala Harris, 51.83% of the vote. New Jersey was 51.97% of the vote. It wasn't too far off, even though Virginia had far more resources and investments. And that's sort of what the Republican Party is kind of getting at in the 2025 cycle. Virginia, too, as a state that is right outside of Washington, D.C., has felt the very dramatic effects of the federal layoffs and DOGE and Donald Trump's influence using the executive branch on the federal government and its employees and the bureaucrats that live in Virginia that commute and work in D.C. Not to mention that Donald Trump just being in close proximity to Virginia has also made it so Virginia is very averse to really liking Donald Trump as president. They didn't vote for him in 2016. They didn't like him in 2020. They didn't vote for him in 2024. Donald Trump and no Republican has won Virginia on the presidential level since the 2004 election. Now, taking a look at the 2024 election in New Jersey, on the flip side, this being the closer race really goes to show that while Virginia might be, yes, shifting towards the right, New Jersey shifted by double the amount that Virginia did in the last election. Virginia shifted by roughly 5, New Jersey by roughly 10. And so that makes a big difference in a 2025 race, especially when gubernatorial races aren't seen with the national implications that a Senate race or a House race or any other type of race might be. And that's because gubernatorial races are ones that are very narrow, in this scope, because they focus on just the state's borders. They focus on what's happening within New Jersey, and it doesn't really matter much outside of that. Now, there's always trickling in of national politics. If people don't like the incumbent Democratic president, they may vote for the Republican for governor anyway. If they don't like the incumbent Republican governor or Republican president, they may vote for the Democratic governor anyway. These are the way things work in electoral politics. But it is a lot less impactful on a gubernatorial stage to some degree because it is easier for whoever it might be on the Republican side of Donald Trump as president, in this case, Jack Ciattarelli, to pitch his case to the voters in New Jersey that Republican governance is necessary in a state that largely shifted away from Democratic politics in the last presidential election. And a big pitch here that Republicans are trying to tap into, largely to no avail so far, but still trying to pitch into, is that New Jersey being a state that shifted heavily towards Trump, there must be voters there that held their nose, voted for Kamala Harris because they believed that Democratic governance at large was positive, but were very discontent with the current state of their state and Democratic politics within the state of New Jersey. And while we might not have seen those elections, all of those voters switch to Trump back in 2024, there's an argument to be made that maybe they're waiting to vote for a Republican for governor in 2025. Now, here's the big problem with that. Although there is a compelling case to be made on that end, the data doesn't back up that Republicans have a very substantive chance in the state of New Jersey in 2025. Do I think New Jersey will be closer than Virginia? I've maintained from the beginning of the election cycle that I do believe that will be the case, and it arguably makes a lot of sense. Virginia, again, has been directly impacted by all of the decisions by the federal government, and obviously in ways that many other states in this country have been too. but none closer in proximity than maybe Maryland, which is already a safe Democratic state. And the thing about Virginia is that because their election cycle is this year, you will see a lot of nationalization of that race, whereas New Jersey, on the other hand, may not see that. Mikey Sherrill is an incumbent congresswoman. She represents a significant chunk of New Jersey and was able to use that to translate into a Democratic primary victory in a very hotly contested multi-way race with a lot of candidates all across the primary running left, right, and center, all trying to break away from each other. You had multiple U.S. representatives in the race. You had presidents of major unions. You had mayors across the state. And you had, again, a very hotly contested primary that Mikey Sherrill ended up breaking about a one-third of the vote across the Democratic primary. Now, obviously, you can have questions and reservations about the way that primaries are conducted and ought to be conducted with ranked choice voting and the way that New York does it, whatever it might be. Point is, though, Mikey Sherrill came out ahead and is the Democratic nominee for governor in this state. Now, New Jersey's GOP primary was a lot less contentious. Donald Trump had a very clear pick, and you can see that in the actual election, Jack Ciattarelli came ahead with about 68% of the vote across the state. So a very substantive margin here, very comfortable one, not much really to consider beyond the fact that Ciattarelli had the major endorsements, was really reeling it in, and was able to do well in that Republican primary. But like I was saying, when it comes down to the data points in this state, while I do believe Virginia will be closer, I don't imagine it will be as close. New Jersey will be as close as many Republicans would have hoped for. A very recent poll done just 2 weeks ago by Signal, which is a Republican firm. They do a lot of GOP polling. We talked about it actually earlier today in the video talking about Georgia's 2026 Senate race. The 2025 data really isn't all that impressive. Now, Mikey Sherrill winning by 7 points would be an overperformance from the last election. But what we find here is that when they push voters, they prime them with what we call, in a way, they're pushing voters with data, or they're reading off a bio representing Mikey Sherrill or Jack Ciattarelli. They try to inflate a Republican, try to deflate a Democrat, and then they re-ask the question, now that you know this, who are you voting for? And what they have come to the conclusion is that Jack Ciattarelli can win the New Jersey governor's race by opposing transgenderism. Now, if you're confused, you have every right to be, because when I read this headline, I was honestly quite surprised. I read it about a week ago. I didn't think much of it, but I figured I'd take time post 4th of July to really dive into the data that they're suggesting. And what they're finding is that even when they're pushing voters in the push poll, saying that after voters are, quote, told of Sherrill's alleged position on transgender rights and other issues, she still comes out ahead in the New Jersey governor's race. What I would think to see here is that if the conclusion was that Jack Ciattarelli, who has largely ran a campaign that I think was very strong in 2021 and had run for governor even in 2017, so this was his third time around running for governor of the state of New Jersey, and also very much might come closer than people expect if Donald Trump can reverse popularity, if he can bring things back home by November, but he probably won't, knowing his track record in the first term, knowing where he was during his time out of office, and knowing where he is today. The point is, though, that this being the takeaway was honestly quite surprising. I think the New York primary, the New York mayoral primary has been one that I think really will cloud a lot of the conversation surrounding New York City and New Jersey's interactive form of government with the major city, that a lot of voters in a lot of voters in New Jersey commute into New York City for work and for a variety of other reasons. I mean, we are finding that this primary might actually be a definitive moment in the New Jersey governor's race. But transgenderism is really quite surprising. I think the Republican Party might have learned a little bit too much in the wrong way from the Trump campaign in the last cycle. Donald Trump's most effective campaign ad, if you take a look at ad analysis from the last cycle, was Kamala is for they, them, Trump is for you. It was that ad. I'm sure you saw it everywhere. If you watched political videos, I saw it everywhere. And I was, traveling around to a bunch of different swing states during the cycle, every single ad blitz. I mean, you would see tens of millions of dollars just poured into that ad, and it was the most effective on voter persuasion metrics. It shifted the most voters. It did the best, but it worked because it painted out Kamala Harris as extreme and Donald Trump as more sensible. And that was the way that it worked. When it comes down to the New Jersey governor's race, it's not as easy to paint Mikey Sherrill in the way you might a national Democratic figure. New Jersey is a much more localized race, and Mikey Sherrill, for most people's purposes, is a centrist, more middle of the road. She's not viewed as this progressive or leftist or whatever it might be, that Republicans might be able to try this similar playbook that Donald Trump did. But one thing, too, that I think just really reiterates it for me is that although Donald Trump did win the last presidential election, he didn't win New Jersey. And so this idea that the same playbook that Donald Trump ripped in 2024 can work in a state he lost in 2024 is quite mind-boggling. I think there are ways for the Republican Party to win the New Jersey governor's race. And while I won't unpack that in this video, there's absolutely going to be ways that Jack Ciattarelli will mess up and will do things very right in this governor's race. And the question is, who is he listening to and what is he doing to get closer to winning the governorship? Mikey Sherrill starts out and maintains this frontrunner status because she's running a very traditional campaign in this state. It's right for the moment, and she knows it's going to be the most competitive governor's race that New Jersey has seen in quite some time, potentially even closer than the 2021 race when Democrats won the state by roughly 3 points. And that's why you see that this campaign isn't taking the same nationalized approach that you might be seeing already developing in the state of Virginia. And so I'd be interested to see, by the time we reach November, how much these data points have changed. Because Mikey Sherrill is maintaining a dominant position in the New Jersey governor's race because right now, voters are souring on Trump in New Jersey. And even if it did shift by 10 points in the last election, you'd have to be working under very similar circumstances for New Jersey to finally flip in favor of the Republican Party. Because in 2021, it didn't happen. And this was when Biden's approval rating was in the negative double digits nationwide, and it was a sleeper race by every metric. No one was focused on New Jersey. Everyone was focused on Virginia. But guess what? New Jersey and Virginia shifted by the same amount, nearly to the exact half percentage point in 2021 away from the Democratic Party. Shifted by 12 points to the right, New Jersey went from being a state that in 2017 voted for Phil Murphy, who was not the incumbent governor then, but is now, or was now, won with 56% of the vote. A margin here of roughly 16, 15 points. In 2021, narrowed down to about 3. Virginia, looking at it in 2017, voted for Ralph Northam by roughly 8, 9 points. Well, guess what happened in 2021? Went to the GOP by about 2 to 3. It's about an 11 to 12 point swing. These are pretty substantive, if you ask me. And so while New Jersey had warning signs about the presidential election in 2021 and Ciattarelli had a very strong performance, even with a very unpopular Democratic incumbent and a very, lack of attention from the National Democratic Party that they aren't giving New Jersey this time. I mean, they are focusing more on it than really ever. 2017 might maybe rival it because Chris Christie was the incumbent and they were trying to take down his lieutenant governor. Point is, though, here, that in 2025, I don't imagine this will be the environment at which Jack Ciattarelli is elected governor. If Kamala Harris was president, it would be an entirely different story. But even then, it would be difficult to see with a candidate as strong as Mikey Sherrill, who in her own right, when you take a look at just the electoral past, when New Jersey went from being a delegation that was 7-5 for Democrats to 11-1, you'll find that Mikey Sherrill came from New Jersey's 11th district. But what's interesting about it is that 2 years prior, that same district had been drawn in a way, same drawing in 18, might I add, but had gone to the Republican Party by 19 points. 19 points. 2 years later, Mikey Sherrill's winning it by 15. In 2020, when Democrats faced a very tough opposition in the New Jersey delegation, and we saw that Jeff Van Drew switched political parties, Mikey Sherrill still won by 7. And then in 22, she was drawn into a safer district, but won by 19. And then in 24, won by 15, when the entire state shifted about 10 points to the right, even in comparison in that popular vote from 22. But you can see that Mikey Sherrill still held strong. And so in 2025, I don't think Mikey Sherrill is the right Democrat for Jack Ciattarelli to beat. And based on the data that we've been seeing, not just from Signal, but every other firm, Survey USA, Rutgers, all of it, show that Mikey Sherrill is in a very strong position. Does this mean I think she will win by 15 points? No, I don't think that's going to happen. New Jersey's a lot closer than it was, and Jack Ciattarelli is a strong candidate. But Mikey Sherrill is arguably stronger. And looking at Jersey in 2025, under an unpopular Trump administration, it is really hard to see the pathway to victory for the New Jersey GOP. It may come, but it will be the most hard-fought thing that the New Jersey GOP has seen in a very long time, and it will have to defy the odds and expectations. But knowing this state's GOP and knowing the state of Donald Trump's second administration, I wouldn't count on it if I was a Republican. Mikey Sherrill is in a strong position and will more likely than not be the next governor of the state of New Jersey. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch, and then a playlist for my 2025 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.